Back, True Seeker, January 3rd, 2018. Going to be the first show of the new year on TFR Live. You never listened before, every Wednesday night, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. on the West Coast, 9 p.m. to midnight on the East Coast. 3-hour radio program, free to listen to, free to call into. If you can't listen live, you can listen to the archived episode for free up to 10 days after the show airs. The numbers to call in right here. You can also listen on iHeartRadio, TuneIn. If you just want to listen on your phone but not actually talk to me, this is the number to just call in and listen. As long as you got long distance, they're all free calls. Tonight we'll talk about what's going on in the news. Slower news cycle to start the year. Keeping my eye on the date, January 7th. We'll talk about why tonight on the show. Big story today. And yesterday, Donald Trump and Steve Bannon going back and forth. CNN had up this is their top story this morning, and right away it just made me think of headlines from earlier in the year about how Steve Bannon was the brain of Donald Trump. And then they've been going back and forth attacking each other's minds. You know, this morning Donald Trump says Steve Bannon has lost his mind. Earlier this year, Bannon was Donald Trump's brain. You see what I'm saying? Stories throughout the year from the BBC. Trump's brain, Steve Bannon emerges from the shadows. You know, it hasn't just been the BBC. A lot of media has referred to Steve Bannon this way as the brain of Trump. Just like how Karl Rove was the brain of George W. Bush. Anyhow, another one from recent weeks. Steve Bannon slams Trump brain trust in new book. And if you listen to the show, what we talk about is the language of gematria, how news is scripted by the numbers, how stories are contrived on certain dates for specific reasons. A lot of interesting things we'll talk about. Consider that we're living in an age where throughout the TV we hear more and more about mental illness. And we live in a world where more and more things become a mental illness diagnosis. This year, gaming, you know, people who play games online, on their computer, on their TV, gaming has now entered in as a classification of mental illness if you're considered to do too much of gaming. And who's going to draw that line? You know, they're creating this world where parents keep their children indoors. They're afraid to let them outside. They grow up in front of the TV, video games. This is what they're used to doing for their hobby, their recreation. Now, it's being declared a type of mental illness. You know, so the world, we're living out an agenda. You know, we're being programmed. We're being led astray. And then we're being told for all of our problems, here's a pill you can buy to solve. What's sick is when you study it greater, you just see how purposeful it all is, how everything is orchestrated by a code, which we call gematria. And if that sounds ridiculous, it's because you haven't been following my work. I show how the FDA releases its drugs by the numbers. We're living in a mad world. We're deep in a really bad science experiment, science fiction novel, if you will. And each week on the show, we break down how it's being contrived. Understand, everything about politics is a puppet show. Donald Trump's a puppet, Steve Bannon's a puppet, Barack Obama's a puppet, Hillary Clinton's a puppet. They got the people of the world fighting over these puppets on strings. Not saying that it's the men behind the curtain, you know, contriving this. They want us constantly, you know, our minds occupied, focused on a distraction, missing the bigger picture, you know. Each election cycle, people fight over the same things while a police state's being built around us, while illegal wars wage, while our taxes are stolen, you know. Nation of working slaves being lied to. People distracted with the news, the bickering, the sports games, all of it. But just yesterday, Bannon referred to Trump Jr. as treasonous. Another big number, 147, huge number with the presidency. U.S. President, 147. President of the United States, 147. 147 windows on the White House. Freemason equals 147, so does conspiracy. Washington, D.C., named after the Freemason George Washington. The headquarters of the ancient accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry for North America is in Washington, D.C. So anyway, we'll talk more about these headlines and why they're coming right now. Tonight, though, the majority of the show, it's going to be sports. We're going to be talking about sports, college football championship, what's going on in the NBA, the playoff picture, the NFL playoffs. Sports are on what's on people's minds. Slow news week, minus the back and forth with Bannon and Trump. We'll talk about the false flag shooting Christmas Eve, Colorado and Nevada. We'll talk about that, but we'll mostly focus on sports tonight. And just things I want to remind people about. There's a real riddle in the world of sports. When the college football Alabama wins the championship, Alabama wins college football championship. Better way to phrase that. When they win, LeBron James wins the NBA Finals. There's this pattern in history. So we're watching to see what happens with this college championship this week. Is it going to be Alabama or Georgia? I see a major narrative for Alabama to win. And what's really interesting, did I not get it up here? I guess I noted it down here. Okay, so look. Here's where we're going to start this. LeBron James, Alabama, there's a riddle. They call LeBron James King James. He won the championship for Cleveland in his 13th season on the real King James's birthday. King James was made a king at 13 months of age. If you write out Holy Bible in gematria, forwards and backwards in the reduction method, sums to 45 both ways. Just like if you write out 13, it's 45 forwards and backwards. The word geometry has sums to 45. Gematria is geometry and language. The belief of Kabbalah, which begins the Bible, the way it's encoded, how God speaks the world into existence. The belief is that God is the master mathematician, the master geometer. The year King James had the Bible made in his name was 1611, which was his 45th year of being. You see? The name Nicholas equals 45, the head coach at Alabama. He beat Clemson 2 years ago with 45 points. Alabama equals 13. It's this relationship with 13 and 45 in the Bible. If LeBron James wins the NBA... If Alabama wins the championship this year, then historically, that means LeBron James will win the NBA Finals following in the summer. And if LeBron goes to the finals and wins this year, let's say Alabama wins, he would become 4-5 in finals. See that? Isn't that something? Oh, yeah. And then the quarterback of Alabama, Jalen Hurts, he's playing against Alabama 154 days. Jalen Hurts is playing against the Georgia Bulldogs 154 days after his birthday in the championship. Georgia Bulldogs equals 154. So does King James. Riddle with King James, Alabama. I mean, isn't it all just a little bit too scripted? Also, we talked about how the Buffalo Bills advanced to the playoffs for the first time since the Music City Miracle, where they lost 22-16. They advanced to the playoffs on a score of 22-16, the same score that they lost to the last time they were in the playoffs. And that was in 2000. Now, all these years later, they advanced to the playoffs with the same score. And I said in the video, I said, how rare is that score? I said, that's an awkward score for a football game, 22-16. So somebody looked it up. There have been 13 22-16 games in the entire history of the NFL. And anyone can do this with a web search. There's all sorts of things, sports indexes that have been built to allow you to look up all sorts of sports information. 13 games in the history of the NFL. He divided that by the total amount of games played. There's been 15,997. And look at this percentage he got. 0.0008. 1265. Think about how small that is. You know? If it was 0.1, that would mean 1 in 10. If it was 0.01, that would mean 1 in 100. 0.001 would be 1 in 1,000. So this is 8, 0.1265 in 10,000. Very small odds and the same score, Glad he went out and did that math. He answered the question that I was asking because I said that's a rare score in the history of the football league, and then for it to happen again, I said that's just more evidence of how it's all scripted. And then think about it, was Buffalo and Titans in that play, Music City Miracle? They're the two wild card teams in the AFC that are away. You know, what are the odds? But yeah, we'll talk about all sorts of things. We'll break down the Alabama game, answer your questions. I wanted to show you something real quick. Where is it at? Oh, right here. It's going to be the 68th game all-time between Georgia and Alabama, and this time for the national championship, the relatively new college football playoff. Isn't that amazing? 68th game all-time between the two teams. Notice there's a new X-Files tonight. If anybody watches that, maybe there'll be some more predictive programming. It's happened in the past. X-Files coming out on the 3rd day of the year. Look at the letter X in Gematria, you know? X3, X-Files 33, 3rd day of the year. How perfect. Here's something else I want to talk about tonight. I want to see what this headline makes people think about. Vikings Stadium, reflector of light, murderer of birds. They're saying a lot of birds have flown in to this new stadium in Minnesota that's hosting Super Bowl 52. I'm just thinking about a team in the AFC that's beat a lot of birds in the Super Bowl. They beat the Eagles, the Seahawks, and the Falcons. Can you name that team? Who are they? And then down here, this made me laugh just reading the article. I mean, we're talking about how they always put these numbers in stories. It says here, last year during the fall migration period between August and November, members of the Society's local chapter, the Roberts Bird Sanctuary, and Minnesota Citizens for the Protection of Migratory Birds photographed 74 birds that were either killed, 60, or stunned, 14, after colliding with the stadium's glass windows. The highest death rate previously recorded for a Minneapolis building was 42 birds. You know, Freemason 42, Masonic 74. Just making up numbers and stories. You guys, how can it just appear in everything like this? But if the Patriots do end up going to the Super Bowl, you know, just remember this story. And talk about this game tonight. It should be going on while the radio show's going on. Maybe try to look at it in real time. My computer's up for the task. But Celtics can get their 31st win tonight. Cavaliers can get their 13th loss on the date that can be written 3/1 or 1/3. Boston equals 31. Garden equals 31 where they play. Basketball 31. LeBron won that championship at age 31 in his 13th season in Cleveland. 13-31. They love those numbers. So, a few more things to that. See the videos I put out on it. But tonight, taking your calls, your questions, breaking down the news, the shootings. The shooting in Las Vegas was a tribute to what happened October 1st, by the way, which we'll get to. The October 1st Las Vegas shooting. But breaking down the news. And I know sports are going to be big tonight. So if you got questions, you got decodes, you want to share who you think's going to win the championships, the playoff games in the NFL, call in tonight. We're taking your calls. But just remember, when you call in, try to keep your call, you know, around 2 minutes. Some people call in and they've, you know, done 50 decodes for the week and they want to read them all off. Make like an hour-long phone call. You can't do that, you know. So if you've decoded a million different things, pick out what the best ones are. The easiest ones to communicate over the radio, those are the ones to share tonight, you know. Choose wisely. All right, Truth Seeker, until next time.